Okay, well, welcome everybody today. Good afternoon. So today we have someone who is an author who's going to speak about, how to become an author and what the career is like. Before we get started, I want to just go through a few things. So over on the right, that's the first thing to do is to check in, make sure that your counselor knows that you're at this event and not anywhere else. And then over on the far left, we have the Great Questions document. So you guys get a lot of good information here. So this is just a really good reference to a good reference to ask potential questions for the presenter. And then in the middle, we have the evaluation form. So this is how we keep track of your attendance. Just make sure you fill that out at the end so you have all the fresh information in your head. Be fully present. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can turn on your camera and unmute your mic. You're not going to show up on the recording. Your voice will show up on the recording, but your face will not. Take notes. It's really great to use your evaluation form as a way to take notes so you have all that information for the future. And then again, don't forget to submit it. That's how we keep track of your attendance. Just make sure you click submit and you'll be good to go. But besides that, I think Jana, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I did this presentation a couple of years ago, and it was so great because there were so many questions and so much engagement. And I'm still working with some of those kids today, and it's gone really well. So I love that you are here and curious about writing. And so what I want to do is I'll talk a little bit about being an author and writing and what my life is like. And I do a lot of different things. It's not just an author. I think it comes down to the act of writing and what that means to me and how that shows up in my life. I have published a book. It's called Me, My Selfie, and I. And this book came out 2 years ago. And I never thought I would even finish one book. And now I'm working on four different book projects, which I'll talk about. So being a writer is a surprise still, even to me. So I love words. I love what words can create. And I'm guessing that most of you have an interest in some form of writing. So what I'd like to find out now, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat so I can take a look, what do you like to write? What are you interested in writing? So I can get a sense of who's here. If you write fiction or poetry or science fiction or fantasy, or I would like to get a sense of what people are interested in writing. So while you fill in the chat, I'll tell you a little bit about what I write. And I will go through the comments in a minute. So I write everything from poetry to nonfiction to fiction and to articles. I just entered a contest here in Santa Fe. It was a nonfiction contest and I won first place. And I was so excited about that. That was a really big deal. All right, so let's see through the comments. Realistic fiction, I see fiction, novel length projects, fantasy fiction, writing fiction with magical elements, fiction and poetry. Excellent. So one of the things I teach is how to unlearn everything you've learned about writing. And I know that sounds counterproductive, being as how this is a school to career workshop and everything, but I think we get so embedded in what we're expected in terms of how to write or what that looks like and about grammar and structure and form. And you're in school to learn all those things, and all those things are wonderful and they're helpful. And it's like with any good recipe, know all the ingredients and then choose to make them your own. I work with so many people. I do writing retreats in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and people come and I spend time with them and help them really get a sense of what it is they want to write. But what's so interesting to me is that most of the people I work with come to me, and the number one thing is lack of confidence. They're usually typically very afraid to get started on a project or share their work, or they have a lot of doubts about the writing being good or bad. And I think as we go through school and we grow up and we're around a lot of settings where we're asked to write, and with all those eyeballs and red pens, we sort of lose our sense of our own voice. And so I think the number one thing I would tell you, if you're interested in being an author or a writer of any kind, is to really start to connect with and understand what it is that you have to say in your unique way, with your unique vision and your unique voice. And all these years, it took me a long time to figure out just exactly what that meant. And I view writing as a conversation. And it doesn't matter what I'm writing, whether I'm writing a poem or a book or whatever it is that I'm working on, an essay. And I've gotten to the point after years and years and years of unlearning everything I've learned so I could find freedom in my own voice. And I've learned that how to connect to myself through my writing is like the most important thing I do. So even though we put our words out there, we submit projects, or we aspire to have everybody love what it is that we write, it takes a long time to have a trust and a connection and an understanding of what it is that you care about and how you're going to write about it. So if I were going to give you any tips or recommendations, I would honestly tell you that the most important thing to me as an author was learning how to appreciate and trust my own work and my own words and my own writing. So how do you do that? Well, it just means writing. And since I do view writing as a conversation, I don't really aspire to the discipline aspect that most people try to teach me, like saying you have to write every day at 7 o'clock in front of your computer, and it's got to be some sort of a discipline or a practice. I can tell you with that philosophy, I had no motivation, no inspiration, and I was often left feeling a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation. And I didn't really feel comfortable sitting down and writing if I felt like I had to. So looking at writing as a conversation really started to change the way I viewed discovering the truth in my own words. If you're in a conversation, a couple of things have to happen. It means you're listening and you are present, and you are going to pick that conversation up, and you may put it away and then you can come back to it. So starting to shift how I viewed what I wanted my writing to be and do for myself changed everything in terms of my own creation and my own creativity. Why is that important for a career in writing? Or why would it make a difference? Well, you start to see that there'll be times when you're going to be asked to write things that may not be exactly the deepest, most profound philosophical creativity that you can possibly imagine. But we all have to do these projects or these assignments or the kind of work that we need to do with writing that's more practical or tactical, and it may not always be creative, and that's fine. Learning how to understand the difference and define it for yourself is where you'll start to get motivation. And with motivation becomes creativity, and with creativity comes opportunity. So that is how I thread that together in terms of why it made a difference for me as a writer. I did go to college, but I didn't go back to school until I was in my late 40s. I did not go to college right after high school, and it's something that I might have done differently, but I will say that getting my education and finishing my degree was very important to me. And then I went on to get a master's in creative writing. So now I can teach writing, and I learned a lot by going to graduate school in creative writing. And so my writing life consists of writing things that mean something to me. I have a poetry collection book coming out next month. I'm working on an anthology collected from every state's poet laureate. And that is going to be about looking at the pandemic through a poetic lens. And so the writing looks like creating books and creating projects. I have a degree that enables me to teach. I finished this one book. I really enjoy writing now. I mean, I think I've developed my life as a writer to be something that is completely sacred and special and inspirational. And I have so much freedom in my writing now, but that took a lot of time to really learn what that means. And in fact, I didn't even want to call myself a writer, even though I had always written. It was like having the title of being a writer was something that was reserved for other people. So it's kind of funny how that works out. But so I've been able to build a life around writing and as an author in a way that doesn't just provide for me, but actually fulfills me. And I don't feel pressured, and I don't feel a lot of expectations. I don't worry about what people think of my writing. I want people to like my writing. I understand why you want to get the validation for your words, but it's not essential to me anymore. So I'm going to ask another question here because I feel like I've been talking a lot. And I'm just curious, have any of you ever written something and you loved what you wrote and you showed it to other people and the reaction was not exactly what you wanted? So let me know if you've braved sharing your work and the types of reactions you've gotten, if they were affirming or disappointing, and are you still afraid to show your work? And do you only show it to your friend, or your do you keep it in the notebook? Okay, so Nikki said, I have, but it was unexpected reaction. All right, well, tell me more. I would like to hear. Absolutely. I worked for hours on a chapter once and my writing coach totally destroyed it. That is so crushing. That has happened to me too. I understand that. And I will tell you, Sonia, do not let that discourage you at all. Because once people have an opinion about your work, I can promise you, no matter what you write, somebody somewhere is going to have an opinion. And believe me, everything that they project onto your work is purely their own stuff. It is not your stuff. And everybody has opinions when you put your work out there. That is true.
Yeah, for me, when I wrote, I showed it to my friend. And then the next day, she came up to me and like, Nikki, I hate you but it wasn't like because it was bad. It was because she started thinking of the scenario herself.
Right.
She just was like, oh my goodness, if it wasn't for your writing, I wouldn't have thought about things while doing chores.
Oh, well, that's cool. I love that. I love that. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for bringing that up. The beautiful thing about your writing and your words is that you never, ever, ever know how it's going to touch someone or inspire someone or shift somebody's thinking. I get that all the time where I write something and I think it might mean something to someone, and then I don't hear anything from that person. But like 2 years later, I get a text from someone that says, I want you to know that your book really made a difference and it's on my nightstand. And I like barely knew that person. And so think about it for yourself. How many things have you read of somebody else's work and you never told them how much their words meant to you? So it works both ways. And so that is something that I never, ever, ever take for granted. And I'm always surprised by. Okay, so how do you deal with writer's block? Writer's block is a real thing. And I think writer's block is really not just about being stuck. It's, I think, when we sit down and we have an expectation of what it is we're supposed to write, and when the expectation is so big, like it's got to be the next great novel or the next best award-winning essay, and there's so much stuff before you even sit down to write it that it's stifling. So there's a lot of things I do to deal with that overwhelm. I look at it more as overwhelm and less writer's block. One thing you can do is when you are stuck is you can take a phrase like it is, or I am, or could you, or, you can take any phrase you want. I think that's a good one. And what you do is, I'll put it in the chat. You go, I think I don't know what to say. And then you go, I think this is a great conversation. Anyway, and what you do is you just keep staying with that single phrase. And every time you get stuck, you just start with it again. I think, I think, I think. And it really opens up everything in terms of the word flow. And I'm never stuck once I do that. The other thing I do is I use the senses a lot. So I'll look around and I can say, I see, or I smell, or I hear, or I feel. You can go to your senses if you're feeling stuck, and it does really work. Another thing I want to say, and maybe this is something that's new to you or not, but to me, everything that you do is writing. So in other words, listening to music can be writing. Walking in the rain can be writing. Reading other people's work, I consider that writing too, because whenever you're doing all these other things, your creativity is there and it's flowing, and that becomes part of your conversation. So you can absorb all that and take all that and use all that to your creative benefit. And so the writer's block, going outside, I walk a lot of miles, and I will sit there and I will talk into my phone in my notes. Because for me, sitting down at a computer and typing is not really productive for me. So sometimes if I want to write, but I'm not going to sit in front of my computer to do it, I will walk and talk into my phone, And I've written some poems and some other things that have come out of even parts of my book I wrote while I was walking and talking into my phone. So writing doesn't have to look like any one thing, and it doesn't have to feel any one way. And you can be open to this idea of it being a conversation that you can jump into and out of. So you don't have to feel bad about not doing it because you're just having a conversation. All right, so how do you choose a topic? What is your process when starting to write? Excellent question. So I would say, I guess it depends on the requirement. If I'm doing an assignment for something, like if I'm writing an essay, usually what I'll do is try to find a thread that I have some emotional relationship with. So for instance, in this writing contest I just did that I won first place, I had no clue that I had won. It's so funny. And I wasn't even going to enter it, but I teach my students all the time, just put your work out there. Just keep putting it out there. Don't worry about how it goes, if it gets published or what happens. Just keep putting your voice out into the world. And so the theme for this writing contest was a prompt, and it was what we owe. And I started thinking about it, like, what a weird prompt. And so I did an essay about what we don't owe. And I wrote that. I came up with that because it was something I feel really emotionally motivated by. So if you can find a thread of something that you feel emotionally connected to, that's a great place to start with any writing project that is not assignment driven, but more creative driven. So for fiction work and poetry especially. Let's see. So Julian said, my teacher says that once your writing goes out there, it's not completely yours anymore. It's true. And it's up for anyone's interpretation. The irony of the writing is that it's all yours and it's not yours at all. It belongs completely to you, and it's completely not yours anymore. I found that to be true over and over and over again. With so much introspection and solitary writing time needed, can the life of an author sometimes be isolating? Yes and no. It's hard to say because we're living in isolating times. I think the pandemic and communicating by Zoom all the time, I call it Zoomtopia. It feels like we're connected, but we're not deeply connected. And so it's an illusion of feeling like isolation, but yet you can plug into your computer and go online and chat with anybody at any time. So that's not, it's hard to say if I would define it as isolating or not, because we're living in really weird times. But I do take time to be in conversation with myself. And to finish my book, I took 2 weeks to be alone in Santa Fe, New Mexico to write my book and to be really in a conversation with myself. And even though I was alone, I learned so much about being with myself, and I didn't feel isolated. I discovered a lot of really cool things about myself, but it can be isolating. But it can also be interesting and rewarding and fulfilling. Let's see. I've had to stop talking to people about the details of my stories because I get stuck in what I tell them. Yes. And then, you know what happens with that? Sometimes we get so stuck on what we want our work to be that we don't really give ourselves room for allowing a story to unfold and present itself to us. So that can also happen. Mariana said, what do you do when you have an idea but cannot write it down? Oh my God, that has happened so many times. That's where I use my phone. I'll talk into my phone. And I typically make sure that I do have a pen that has ink in it, because I've had pens that don't write, that I have a pen nearby. And even if I write down 1 or 2 words, that goes to what I want to write, so I don't forget it, because it is important. It is important. And that's where my phone, writing and talking. What is the longest piece you have ever written? Right here. This book started out as 100,000 words, give or take. I ended up editing it down to about 70,000 words. But I spent 4 years, with 3 of those years struggling, saying I was going to write a book and being so stuck and frustrated. But it happened in a lot of pieces over a long period of time. How did you get started in writing as a profession? Excellent question. I think I did the writing thing as like a public relations person, where I would write press releases and I would help shape stories for nonprofits and for companies. And one thing I would suggest is, if you want to get started with writing and building and getting familiar with your voice and creating content, is just start a blog. Start writing down your thoughts and building a body of work and cultivating your voice, discovering what interests you. I do not believe that you have to stick in any one form. And even in poetry, I'm all about formless, structureless, explore. Things are changing to where you can write and create and use all forms and all structures, and even multimedia work with collage and photography and video and overlapping words onto images can be really powerful. And so to finish that question, I just started building a body of work. I wrote other people's stories, and I used a lot of marketing language and a lot of marketing strategy talk and professional applications with my writing. It didn't really stop me from my own creative writing, but it didn't really help either. So as long as you can keep your own creative voices going. And you know what? I'm going to give you something right here. Every day there's this website, it's called poets.org. And I put it in the chat. And you can sign up for getting a poem a day. And listen, I had zero interest in poetry for most of my adult life. I mean, just literal no interest, because I was so intimidated and I thought it had to be so stuffy and you had to have some secret handshake to join the poetry club. But my whole idea around poetry has completely changed, and I write it all the time now. And looking at poets.org and signing up for the poem a day was one of those things that changed it. Now, I don't read it every day. I know it can be a lot, but what that did was that it opened me up to the freedom of hearing and seeing and getting to know how other people construct poems. And it encouraged me. And it helped me with writer's block, and it helped with my confidence, and it helped me discover my own voice. And so that really made a difference. How do you come up with ideas for characters? That's a great question. I do write short fiction, and sometimes I'll hear somebody say something in the grocery store, or I'll get like I'll notice some weird detail, like a shoe on the side of the road. And I kind of meditate on the questions. Asking questions goes a long way with helping me develop ideas for characters. We all know people that are really super funny or super quirky or super weird or super quiet. And sometimes just observing and reflecting on what it is that you're seeing around you, being present for it and listening, and then asking questions can really help with ideas for characters, because life is pretty weird. We're all pretty weird. Things are pretty weird. And I kind of use that to my advantage. I use that to my advantage. And I wrote a story. Somebody had said something about, I don't know how the idea came to me, but I wrote a short story and it's called Dirt Road Jesus. And it was just from something that I had heard, and I had pictured who would be this character. And she's this teenage girl, she's 14, and she lives at the end of a dirt road. And she has a mother who is very absent and domineering at the same time. And I wrote about this like girl's solitary existence, and the mother wanting to be the all-present, all-powerful, and so she became this symbol of like wanting to be Jesus. And I don't know, the story just kind of blossomed. So the characters started to develop, and I kind of just really pictured what was her room that she was sitting in, what kinds of toys did she have around her, and I just started to really imagine and give myself that freedom to really be curious and ask questions. And so that's how I come up with characters. All right, I see you guys are asking great questions. Thank you so much. I seem to have troubles with the flow of my sentences, like they seem too similar in structure and disrupts how I write. Do you have any advice? Yes, absolutely. My guess is that you're probably somebody who edits while they're writing. I don't know, but I'm just making an assumption here. So to me, when you're editing while you're writing, that kind of does stop the flow. And it took me a long time to kind of just write whatever I was thinking and feeling. And again, as a conversation, if you were having a conversation with a friend, you wouldn't stop them and tell them, well, that's not right. You wouldn't do that. So you would just listen and let them say what they have to say, right? So I took a long time to unlearn. Again, it goes back to unlearning that I don't edit when I'm in the midst of writing. I keep that to the end. My philosophy is this: write whatever you need to write, say whatever you have to say, let it flow, let it go, be in a conversation with yourself. You can always edit, and that's what editing is for, and that's later. So using a thesaurus also can be really helpful, because if you're looking at sentences that seem too similar, probably there's words that are similar too. So using a thesaurus helps. I hope that answered your question. My biggest fear around writing is that if I pursue a career as an author, I won't be financially stable. How can I feel secure while following my dream? Yeah, that's a great question. So the way my writing shows up in my life, and I think most artists feel this way, whatever art, is that art is not viable. Art is not currency. Creativity doesn't equate financial stability. And I understand that we're a society that's driven towards being mechanized and production driven, and it's all about productivity. And where does creativity fit in that? So the way I piece together a life as a writer is maybe sometimes I do writing that's professional writing, like there's copywriting. If you Google copywriting jobs, there are so many. Also, creating content. A lot of companies right now, there's tons of jobs for people wanting to create content for social media, for blog posts, for videos. So creating content for other people is absolutely a viable way to make money. as a writer. Doing the book thing, it's not that the book itself is making me a lot of money, but I'm able to go and do talks, which I get paid for. I got my master's degree, so I can teach now. So I'm doing that. I do one-on-one work with other people, coaching them in their writing. So it may not look exactly the way you imagine with a book that sells millions of copies, and maybe it will, and that's great. But it really does come down to looking at the creative ways people need words, and the fact that you're such an amazing writer, you can help them create those words. And so I would look online for jobs just to get an idea of like social media content creators, blog content creators, copywriting. There's a lot of ways to, and marketing. Marketers need writing. You can write websites for other people, website content. So that is the way I would feel financially stable and still pursue the creativity. Whenever I write, it comes out really profound to me, but also very unstructured and short. Is there a way you found that can help lengthen creative work and structure a narrative while also retaining an unstructured style? That's a good question. You know, there's a lot of writers that write very sparse, and Raymond Carver. I don't know if you've read any of Raymond Carver's work, but I also think that this is for Avery's question, that it's your style and it's your voice. So my question to you would be, why would you want to lengthen the creative work? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Was this subject, did you have an emotional relationship with the subject? Is there something that you're trying to achieve? Your writing may just be that way right now, but it will evolve and shift and morph as you read more writers, as you write in different formats. Sometimes I write in fragments, and that's good enough. Like, I have a book coming out and it's going to have pieces of just fragmented ideas. And will everybody get it? Probably not. But I really enjoyed the conversation with myself, and I was happy with how it came out. So I like that sparse style. Actually, it's the way I write personally myself. Okay, what do I do? You guys are asking amazing questions. I love this. What do I do about others stealing my stories? That has never happened to me, so I can't really address that. Sure, people can copy and paste online, but I don't know that I personally don't worry about that so much. I'm not saying it's not a valid concern. It is. It's just not something I really had to deal with myself. But so I wish I had a better answer for you. Probably once you publish something, even if it's online and it has your name on it, and your name is associated with it, my guess is that if it became a legal issue or something, you would always have recourse. But you do you, develop your words. And yeah. When I write, I turn off the grammar and spelling. Yes, amen. I do too. I can always go back and edit because it's irritating. I don't need it to tell me what I want to say. I have enough trouble with figuring it out myself. So what is a normal workday like? Do you write every day? Excellent question. Thank you, Mabel. Normal workday is, I have worked for myself for 25 years, and I know that is not common. I was I was always a little bit of a rebel. And so I've always figured out a way to build my life so that I am self-employed. So a normal workday to me, like I can tell you right now, I'm working on this poetry book, this collection with every state's poet laureate. And today I've been writing the letters to, I'm going to have a GoFundMe campaign set up, and I'm going to be working on a video talking about the importance of poetry. And I am writing an article for a magazine. It's a local magazine here in Santa Fe. It's called Trend Magazine. I'm getting paid $500 for a 1,200 word article, which is pretty good pay. So I'm trying to finish up that story. It's a profile piece. I'm going to take my boyfriend to the airport, and I'm going to come home and probably take a walk. So like every day is a combination of things I need to do right now, projects that I'm working on to build for the future. I teach classes. I teach a free online writing class on Tuesday nights. So I've been doing that for 2 years since the pandemic. And so I'll be probably prepping for that class. It's just a hodgepodge. And I do write every day, but it's not the way you would imagine. I don't sit in front of the computer and have my coffee and my artist's way writer's notes, and everything has to be so ritualistic and ceremonial. And because some days I wake up and I don't feel like it, honestly. Some days I'm not inspired, but then I'll go out and walk and something will hit me. I wrote a poem just this morning when I was walking, and it's called There Is No Graceful Goodbye. There is no graceful goodbye. It's a lie. It's a lie. To say it's a graceful goodbye, rants and illusions. A tale to be told. Self-preservation to soften the lie. The lie he tells against and again. For self-preservation, to soften rants and illusions, to avoid the goodbye, the lie that there is no graceful goodbye. And, it's right here. It's just on my phone. And so I do write every day, but it doesn't look the way we're told it's supposed to look. I use everything around me and everything at my disposal to write. And that means listening. That means observing. It means being outside. It means allowing myself to express myself when I'm feeling like something's coming up and I don't know why, but I go with it. I don't stop myself anymore. I wrote a poem. It was so weird. I woke up at like 6 a.m. This was like a month ago. And the first line is, I'm inside a whale's mouth. And it was this poem. It's one of my favorite pieces I wrote. And I have no idea why that came to me, but the poem is called Baleen. And so I went with it. I just went with it. What would you say are the most important qualities or skills necessary for this occupation? Excellent question. Practice. Getting familiar with your voice, feeling confident, doing research online. There is a great site. I'll put it in here now. Submittable.com. And you can go on there and there are grants and contests and places you can submit. And so I think it just takes putting stuff out there over and over and over again, building a body of work, reading other people's writing, trying different forms, trying different structures, being open to what comes up, and self-love. That may not be something that's on a resume for a necessary skill for an occupation, but I really believe that self-love goes so far in allowing your expression to be sacred to you and protected by you and celebrated. Nobody is going to write your stories the way you will. I promise you that. Do you plan out the entirety of your plot before sitting down to write, or do you write and plan as you go? Excellent question. I would say if I had to pick one or the other, I mostly don't plan out a plot. I might have a very loose outline. If I know who this character is or what their struggles are or what it is they want to achieve or how they fail, that's the other thing. I write about people's flaws a lot, including my own, and I'm not afraid to do that, to be honest. That's part of the conversation. You can't cherry pick the qualities of a story. You can't only have the good. You've got to be honest in these conversations. So I will write about the flaws too. And if we're going to be honest in the conversation when we write, as flawed people, we don't always turn out the way we hope. And so I think that's true for the writing. But I will say, for a novel or something ambitious, big project like that, maybe sci-fi or fantasy, even, I can see why you might want to put, let's just call them mile markers, right? They're guideposts. You know that your character is going to start off somewhere and you want them to end somewhere, and what happens in the middle, right? So you can put down those plot points, but I would say they should be in pencil, willing to be erased. Something more interesting may come up, something more dynamic, something more surprising. One of my sayings is and this is just me, if I'm in a conversation, if I already know what I say before I even write it, then it's probably not honest. I mean, I don't buy it. If I already knew what it was before it even got down on paper. Now, it's not to say you don't need to think through things. And it's not to say that you don't need to have structure, but it is to say that the best writing, the most interesting writing, the most honest writing, 8 times out of 10, you're going to surprise yourself. And it's amazing when it happens. It's so cool. It's like the greatest thing. How do you come up with cover art for books? That's a great question. I want to hear. You've got a book in store. I see it. You're already thinking ahead and being optimistic. I think there's a lot of different ways to come about cover art for book. This particular image, this was a photo I took in Hawaii. There's no photoshopping in this image. It was actually walking on a deck of a house, and I was outside looking at the window, and inside the house was a mirror, and I saw myself, and it was so interesting to have see the picture and then my reflection and everything. This was just a photo I took. I chose this for the book because it seems so perfect. But cover art is such a fun aspect of it when you get to that point when you're like, what do I want this book to visually convey? It's pretty exciting. And so I look at other art to get inspired. That is how I choose the cover art. There are some books that have horrible, awful, terrible covers, but there are some books that have some very cool and interesting covers. And I just finished for this poetry collection. I wish I could show you this image. It's a friend of mine. She did a collage. It's a woman standing with a white dress billowing, and she's got these 2 snakes over her. It's really cool, and it's perfect for the book. How do you get yourself into the zone for writing? I think just being open. One thing that really inspires me is walking. I just think being outside, there's so much when you're not actively focused on I have to write, and you put all that pressure on yourself. But when you kind of do it in a meditative way where you might be looking at the clouds or looking at the cars passing by. I mean, how many of us go to the airport and people watch and wonder where they're going or if they're leaving something or going to something? And the stories are always alive. Going to the supermarket is like you could have a book just from sitting in the supermarket, especially now because people are so like weird and the mask thing, and there's so much to just observe and be around. So getting in the zone is about listening and being present and asking questions and giving myself room and not being hard on myself. And all those things get me in a zone. Do you recommend self-publishing or going through traditional publishing houses? I am 100% of the self-publishing realm. Traditional publishing houses are so complicated now. They really want you to have at least 100,000 followers, and you could be the best writer and have the best book and 1,000 followers or whatever and not get a book deal. And you get somebody like Kim Kardashian, and I'm not knocking the girl, I'm just saying you could get somebody that has cachet in the public realm and they could get 10 book deals tomorrow. Publishing houses take a lot of the royalties. It takes years and years to deal with their junior editors who may or may not even get your concept of what you're looking for. So I'm all about self-publishing. I would not have published my book and it wouldn't have given me everything it's given me if I tried to go through a traditional publishing house. So I'm going to give you another source. It's called bookbaby.com. It's in the chat. And they have a whole huge wealth of resources related to self-publishing. How do you do it? Why do you do it? What do you need to know? And I've actually published a couple of articles on their blogs. Another way that my writing shows up, I just reached out, and their blogs and social medias reach 750,000 people. And I have never published anything that has reached that many people potentially. So that was pretty much a big deal. But BookBaby is an awesome resource for self-publishing just to get information. When you go through a traditional publishing company, usually you have to have an agent, and it would have taken years. Like this book would not even be out yet. I wrote this book for 3 years ago, it would still be like, unless it's a catastrophe or something where they fast track it, it takes years. And so I don't want to totally discourage that as a possibility, but I would more encourage self-publishing as a possibility. If that answers that question. Do you think there is a lot of opportunity, growth, and job opportunities, job outlook? Yeah, definitely, because I think platforms are king. Content is king, as they say, and there's always going to be a need for people to create content. And you know what I love about our conversation right now is I want to say the world needs better content, more meaningful content, more substantive content. Write about things you care about, write about things that matter, write about things that you're passionate about, especially for people of color and anything that relates to a diverse or non-mainstream perspective. I absolutely encourage. That's where I thrive and want people to know your voice, your stories, your contribution to the community conversation is vital right now. So the job outlook, there's so many opportunities. Just Google copywriting, marketing, blog, there's just content creation, and there's tons of stuff. Would you recommend a particular major in college to help with your writing? That's such a good question. My college track was so zigzagged and it was never linear. And I know college is expensive and I know it's a big decision. For me, I probably would have gone to community college for 2 years and then on to a 4-year university or something. And English as a major has a lot of flexibility. And every school is different. I think I would really look at who are the writers and the instructors at a school, because finding some compatibility, there are lots of schools that offer writing programs, but if they're stuffy or stodgy or don't really resonate or don't have a faculty of diversity and they don't have like diverse styles and diverse voices, then it probably wouldn't be a school I would pursue. But English is probably a pretty safe major, just because you can take it in different directions depending on how you pursue your studies. So some amazing questions, and my guess is we're probably running out of time. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you that would be encouraging. There's so many beautiful things that can come from writing, and whether it serves as the financial basis of your life or not, or is part of your career decisions and your college decisions, stay open to the process of learning and listening and growing and connecting. Read other people's work. I was not the one that was going to be in the coffee shop, on a rainy day, clacking on my typewriter keys, looking pensive out the window, in some intense, morbid, like, the pictures that we have of writers, they're all modeling and they're all forlorn and everything. But writing can be fun, and it can be absurd, and it can be interesting, and it can be completely self-inspiring, and it can show up in so many different ways. I would encourage signing up for that poem a day, because that really did change my life. And yeah, it really did change my writing life. I never, ever loved poetry. In fact, I disliked it. And now the fact that I'm working on 2 books that relate to poetry is so surprising and ironic, but also lovely and wonderful. And so I'm grateful for everything that it's brought me. The intangibles are real. The connections that you'll make with other people, the conversations that will come up, the things that you'll discover about yourself. I know that we're talking about practicality, about how to make a living doing this stuff, but I'm telling you, the intangibles mean just as much, if not more, to me, because of all of the things writing has gifted in my life and to myself. And I've been lucky and fortunate, and I work at making it a career. And but I'm also open to the interpretation of how that shows up, what I do to make it happen, and the fact that it's never just about the productivity for me. In fact, that's the last thing I ever consider. So it's taken a long time to unlearn everything I learned. And so now you guys are in a great position, because you're young enough and you can shape and shift in any direction you want, which is lovely. All right, does anybody else have any other questions, or are we good? What would you like, Goldie?
Sorry, I think that's about it. I think there's a lot of great information, kind of inspiring me to want to go write tonight. So really great information.
Yeah, that's good. Inspiration's good. And you know what? Do not get discouraged. There are so many times when we wonder what we're doing. What is the purpose of this? Who cares? Does it matter? it's not good enough. And you know, you have your everything we do. There's people that are going to tell us why we can't or why we shouldn't, or it doesn't make money or it's not viable. But I promise you, if you stay open and you look at it as a conversation and you make room for the observance of life, and you record it and you explore it and you discuss it and you contemplate it and you write about it, so many amazing things come out of it. So many amazing things, unexpected all the time, but lovely for sure.
Okay, well, students, or did someone say something? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So when you self-publish, how do you keep track of like who buys stuff and stuff like to get the money back?
Well, through the self-publishing company, BookBaby has part of their platform built in. It's like an accounting summary. And they do the distribution, and the distribution is like a really complicated thing. I don't even understand all of it, but the distribution. So like I am on Amazon, and when somebody goes and buys a book, it goes through to BookBaby. BookBaby fulfills the order, and then they keep track and they have an accounting of it. And I'm sure that each self-publishing company has some variation, but let's say you chose to just literally print the book and hold them in-house yourself and do all the distribution and everything. My guess is that part of it might get overwhelming. So I would rather, like, for me, the time and the convenience, I'd rather have a company do all that and then just send me the money. The royalties work out differently. Like for Amazon, I might get $1, whereas if somebody buys it through BookBaby, I might get $6, but I don't really look at it from the money standpoint, because from the book, this is just the starting point. It's what comes from it. The people I meet, the speaking engagements I do, the teaching gigs I get, the articles I write, like, so a lot of other things come from it. But I would suggest Googling self-publishing companies, and there's a huge range, and they do have conferences. There's a conference in Oregon. It's called the Willamette Writers Conference in the summer. That is a great place to go and get as much information as you possibly can about being an author, publishing, writing. You get to network, you get to connect with other people. And you asked really great questions. I appreciate that. I hope that you're going to be inspired and create something amazing. If you haven't already, stay with it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're a little bit past the hour. Students, if you guys need to head out, feel free to do so. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.